it's Janelle Waz, and welcome back to another episode of Treknalysis. Beverly Crusher, Doctor, Chief Medical Officer, and part-time vampire? Or at least that's what you might think with the way she was after Worf's blood in the Star Trek The Next Generation episode, The Enemy. Poor Worf, he tends to get the short end of the pain stick. The Enterprise is standing on the brink of war with the Romulans, and it could very well be one Klingon's blood that preserves the peace. But where does the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few? What limits do an individual's rights have? Does Worf have the right to refuse to donate his blood? Will Worf gain a new blood brother in a random Romulan he found on a planet? And most importantly, do we even know what Andreas Katsoulis looks like without alien makeup? This week on Treknalysis, it's Season 3's The Enemy.
Captain Picard, my apologies.
But before I go further, make sure you subscribe to my channel. I talk a lot about Star Trek, video games, and whatever else I feel like talking about. And if you'd like to help support the channel, consider becoming a member. Be great to have you aboard. It was a dark and stormy night. Worf, Riker, and Geordi beam down to the planet and do a whole lot of shouting.
Placing beam out marker. Communicators are dysfunctional. Good thing we didn't bring data.
Will you just shut up and let me talk?
Geordi, however, finds something amid all the chaos. A Romulan craft. And they're in Federation space. Well, what else is freaking new? When aren't the Romulans trespassing into Federation space? Of course, there's not much to salvage since the craft was, strangely enough, destroyed after the crash. And separating himself from the group, a smart choice in these conditions, Worf finds one live Romulan and knocks him out. To be fair, he did try to attack Worf. Meanwhile, Geordi falls down a hole and loses his visor.
Hey, my glasses! I can't see without them. They should be around here somewhere.
And then Geordi learns a hard lesson. In space, no one can hear you scream.
War! War! Johnny! Anybody!
And with Geordi nowhere to be found, Riker, Worf, and the unconscious Romulan beam back to the Enterprise, leaving Geordi quite alone on the planet.
War!
We return from the opening credits to Picard saying perhaps the coolest planet name in the history of Star Trek.
On the surface of Galorndon Core.
Come on. You can't tell me you could have come up with a better name than that.
Galorndon Core.
Beverly takes the unconscious Romulan to sickbay, and considering the Romulan tried to attack him upon first introduction, Worf attempts to put a security detail around sickbay.
He's not going anywhere, Lieutenant.
Worf denied for legitimate security concerns once again. Meanwhile, Geordi is stuck on Galorndon Core alone and is trying to get out of the hole. And the first thing he does is dig.
We'll dig our way out.
No, in reality, Geordi was melting some metal to make a spike so he can Nathan Drake his way out of this. Man, Uncharted made this look so easy. But even without Nathan Drake's superhuman strength, Geordi manages to make it out okay. Back on the Enterprise, Riker's looking for a way to send a signal to Geordi.
We could build a portable neutrino source. It'll act like a beacon.
Of course Wesley comes up with a solution. Data's also picking up a Romulan ship responding to the crashed ship's distress call, commanded by none other than Tomalak, played masterfully by Andreas Katsoulis, who definitely should have been on the show more. Heck, maybe even in DS9, so we can gaze in awe at the amount of smugness between Tomalak and Dukat. It would be a sight to behold.
I assure you, Captain, no aggression was intended.
Picard calls up Tomalak, who claims that the other ship had a slight navigational error. Which everyone knows is crap.
Slight navigational error. Nearly half a light year past the neutral zone.
Picard also informs Tomalak that they recovered a Romulan officer and asks if there are any more. Tomalak says no, it was just a one-man craft, and says he'll meet Picard in the neutral zone to pick up his officer before ending the transmission.
There's great hostility behind his smile.
No shit, Deanna! But what about our Romulan friend in sickbay? Well, he's not doing so great. He needs blood. Apparently the magnetic fields on Galorndon Core did a number on his body, so he's in pretty bad shape. Picard and Riker want to keep him alive for interrogation, but even when he's awake for a couple of minutes, he's unwilling to answer questions. So Beverly starts screening crewmen for blood donations. Human blood is no good. Heck, even Vulcan blood isn't going to work despite the fact that Vulcans and Romulans are basically distant cousins? Wait, how does this not work? They have a shared ancestor and are basically considered offshoots of each other. Heck, the only reason they're not one people is because of ideological differences. How does this not work, Beverly? Meanwhile, Geordi's on the planet and things are going pretty great. But it's one step backwards and 2 steps forward for Geordi as he finds Wesley's beacon and has a waypoint to head towards.
Thank you, Wesley.
And he knows it was Wesley because, of course, it was Wesley. But Geordi soon discovers that he's not alone on Glornden Core. Geordi awakens to discover that he's been mugged and an angry Romulan is holding a phaser on him.
Shoes are getting full of sand. I just hate that, don't you?
It's coarse and rough and irritating, and it gets everywhere.
The Romulan, whose name is later revealed to be Bakra, is taking Geordi prisoner and that he'll accompany him on board a Romulan ship when it arrives. To which Geordi says that they heard the same distress call and that the sky is full of Federation ships.
You're lying. I never lie when I've got sand in my shoes, Commodore.
But it's just the Enterprise in orbit. You really are lying here, Geordi.
I never lie when I've got sand in my shoes, Commodore.
But Bakra is about to learn that karma is indeed a for you see, Geordi lies and Bakra gets pummeled by a rock slide. Geordi takes him into a cave for shelter and still gets a phaser pulled on him.
Welcome to Glornden Core, where no good deed goes unpunished.
But I happen to be a firm believer in rule of acquisition number 285. No good deed ever goes unpunished.
Meanwhile,
Lieutenant, good.
I'm sorry I denied you earlier, Lieutenant.
He's not going anywhere, Lieutenant.
Turns out that Worf is actually a perfect match for the Romulan, and I'm sorry, how? You mean to tell me that Vulcans, literal relatives of Romulans with a common ancestor, don't have compatible blood, but Worf, a Klingon, does?
And you have what this Romulan needs.
I don't believe that.
Doctor.
Ever been to medical school.
Worf, however, is a bit displeased. Apparently he didn't put 2 and 2 together that this was for the Romulan and not just a routine blood test. Worf refuses to donate his blood to the Romulan, but he has a pretty solid reason. It's not that he's afraid of blood, after all he cuts his hand in DS9 like it's no big deal. Worf is none too fond of Romulans because they killed his parents right in front of him when he was young, leaving him an orphan.
They killed my parents in an attack on Kittamar when they were supposed to be our allies.
But this is not the time or the place.
If you had seen them kill your parents, you would understand, Doctor.
But Vampire Beverly is out for blood. Literally Worf's blood. She pleads with him, this Romulan didn't kill your parents, even though this Romulan tried to kill Worf 15 minutes ago. And you're the only one who can save his life, Worf. Worf's all, yeah, well, tough shit, and leaves, leaving Beverly shocked and appalled.
I am shocked and appalled.
And I have to say it, I can't really fault Worf here. Yes, they can hopefully gain some intel from the Romulan, but Beverly is asking a lot of a guy who has the trauma of seeing his parents killed in front of him by Romulans, and she kind of treats it like an afterthought. Yeah, I know your parents were killed by Romulans, but this Romulan guy really needs your blood. It's times like this I wish Dr. Pulaski was still on board the Enterprise because she developed a little rapport with Worf and even understood some Klingon customs. I feel like she would have been more understanding of Worf's feelings and would have treaded more carefully than Beverly did. And the other reason I can't fault Worf is that it's his blood. He has a say in what he does with it. It really is his choice whether or not he wants to donate it.
You have an objection to being a donor.
Yes.
Meanwhile, Geordi and Bakra are getting along.
Bakra, sit down!
Oh, and they're also both starting to become ill because of the planet. Great. Tom Malak's also calling the Enterprise, asking why they're not in the neutral zone to meet him. Picard is still waiting for his away team, and the Romulan's life is still in jeopardy in sickbay. Tomalak is offended that Picard won't let him cross into Federation space to pick up his officer, getting even more agitated. Also great. But at least on Galorndon Core, Bakra and Geordi agree to work together in order to get off the planet. Heck, they even find some common ground in that they both don't want to die. Bakra even lowers his phaser. There's just one problem.
I'm blind.
Yep, Geordi can't use his visor because he's too sick. Great! Meanwhile, Riker's browsing Facebook when Worf walks into his quarters and throws back a shot of something.
For what it's worth, I understand your bitterness.
Jeez, Will, you're guilt-tripping him too? I need a counter for this. Worf explains that he can't give up his lifeblood to people who killed his parents, which again is understandable. Riker starts laying it on thick though. So you blame all Romulans? What if the Federation and Romulans become allies? Remember, you Klingons were at war with the Federation. Except unlike the Federation, the Romulans have a bit of a history of treachery that the Klingons would find hard to forgive.
Where does it end, Worf?
It should have ended when Worf told Beverly he didn't want to donate his blood. It's still his blood!
Then you believe I should.
But I believe. Doesn't matter.
Oh, bullshit, Will. If that were true, you wouldn't be trying to pressure Worf with your litany of reasons he should just do it.
Lieutenant Worf, report to sickbay.
Not again!
It's not too late to change your mind.
Chalk another one up on the board! Vampire Beverly strikes again!
I do not like doctors.
Yeah, I can see why.
Come close to me, Klingon. Let me die with my hands at your throat.
Guy, you already tried that. It didn't work.
I would rather die than pollute my body with Klingon filth.
Well, that settles it. The Romulan refused a blood transfusion. In theory, Beverly can't force him to take the blood because it would violate all sorts of ethical codes.
You wish to see me, Captain?
I assume you know what it's about.
Holy, no means no, Captain! I mean, if I were Worf, I wouldn't donate my blood out of spite at this point. After Picard acknowledges the facts of the situation, if the Romulan dies, Tomalak could start a war, he also states that he tries his best to balance the good of the many against the needs of the individual. Which sounds strangely familiar.
The needs of the many outweigh
the needs of the few.
If you order me to agree to the transfusion, I will obey, of course.
I don't want to order you.
Oh my gosh, he just gave you an out, Captain! He can't willingly agree to it because of what happened to his parents. If you order Worf, his honor is still intact and you get your live Romulan. I'm not saying that would be right, but Vampire Picard would get what he wanted. You're not going to get anywhere trying to convince Worf to volunteer for the blood donation because he stated multiple times why he can't. It's times like this that it's very apparent that Picard is treating Worf like another human and not a Klingon. You can't use the same arguments against him because they simply won't work. But no, Picard insists Worf volunteer, and Worf refuses. Again!
Do not continue to enlist the cooperation of Lieutenant Worf.
I won't have to, Captain. The Romulan has died.
So even if Worf agreed just now, it wouldn't have mattered. Well, I guess that's the last we'll hear about it from Beverly.
How fortunate that you know something of Romulan medicine.
Yes, I had a chance to gain some experience recently.
Oh, let it go! Meanwhile, on the planet, seemingly stranded and waiting for death, Bakra gets the idea to mod Geordi's tricorder with his visor. However, Geordi can't see what he's doing because he's blind and can't work on the tricorder through touch. However, Bakra agrees to be Geordi's eyes while Geordi instructs him on what to do, which proves successful.
The first Federation Romulan co-venture.
I really like the Geordi-Bakra dynamic in this episode. How even though they're enemies, they're able to find common ground in order to work together to find a way off the planet. I could probably do a separate video about these two, but for right now, let's get back to the Enterprise. Tomalak arrives and he's a bit hostile.
There's great hostility behind his smile.
And once Picard informs him that the Romulan officer has died, Tomalak is about to start a full-out war.
Then he is but the first to fall, Picard.
But lo and behold, Geordi has reached the beacon, and he's got a little friend. Huh, that's interesting. How many people did Tomalak say was in that craft?
It was a one-man craft.
Well, this is awkward.
Simple misunderstanding, Captain Picard.
Bakra says that while he didn't give them any information, Geordi was the one who saved his life. Tomalak disarms, Picard agrees to beam Bakra over to Tomalak's ship, and Picard ends the episode remarking on how brinksmanship is a dangerous game.
Brinksmanship is a dangerous game.
And that was The Enemy. A pretty good episode for both Season 3 and the entire show. Probably the strongest part of the episode, or even the whole point of the episode, is Geordi and Bakra putting aside their hostilities and learning how to work together. But the reason why I wanted to make this video was Worf. I know you can interpret his actions as being selfish or risking war, but I can't fault him in this episode. If anything, I place more blame on Beverly and to a lesser extent, Riker and Picard. Worf clearly has issues with giving his blood to a Romulan, all stemming from watching Romulans kill his parents, and everyone treats it like an afterthought. That's a pretty big reason that everyone should take seriously and not throw to the side. Also, why isn't Deanna talking to him about this? The episode also touches on an individual's rights over the good of the whole, Worf having the right to do what he wants with his blood versus forcing him to donate his blood to the Romulan. Clearly, Picard doesn't want to supersede Worf's individual rights, but at the same time, he wants Worf to comply on his own free will, which was never going to happen. Heck, what about the Romulan? He refused Worf's blood. Was Beverly going to violate how many ethical codes to give him that transfusion? Yeah, I have to side with Worf on this one, and he shouldn't have been pestered repeatedly to change his mind. Even in times of crisis, he still has rights that were eventually respected, but not after putting him through a lot of guilt and pressure. If you're going through Next Gen for the first time, definitely give this episode a watch. It's got a nice plot about people learning how to work together, as well as an ethical dilemma to discuss.
I have to weigh the good of the many against the needs of the individual.
So what do you think? What did you think of the episode The Enemy? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Where do you stand on Worf's dilemma for this episode? Should he have given blood, or was he in the right? Please, leave comments below and discuss. As always, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Treknalysis. If you like what you see, why not give my video a like and subscribe to my channel? Tell your friends! Until next time...
I'll need a drop of blood. Your blood.